Hey everybody, welcome to the PC Perspective podcast. This is episode 305 being recorded on June 18th, 2014. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Allyn Malventano.
So the whole gang's here, but we have a special guest with us as well. Welcome back, 2-year plus returning guest, David Hewlett. Hi, David. How are you?
Very good. Thank you, PCPer people.
So it's been a couple years since we've talked to you. What have you been up to? What are you doing these days?
I've been focusing on losing as much hair as possible.
Okay. Has that been a successful venture for you so far?
Very good. It's something I've discovered I'm very, very good at.
He's catching up.
And I think part of that hair loss thing is about, I've just finished this feature film that I wrote and directed. So that has been just eating up all of my time.
Yeah.
And then there's a kind of a weird sort of backlash to the whole process of making films and with budgets and crews and things. I've now sort of taken on this YouTube thing, which I'm just absolutely enthralled with. I just love this immediacy of this thing. So basically, it's been between YouTube, feature films, and writing and stuff. It's been kind of fun and busy.
It's interesting to see what the kind of videos that you have put out on the channel, right? Very, one-on-one. You're talking to a specific audience. And you're doing them fairly frequently as well, which I think is a big plus on that particular outlet. And something we struggle with here is making sure we're putting out enough content to the fans and the user base to consume it and reply and get feedback and cycle through. I mean, have you seen a good response to those videos? I mean, how are you working with that audience?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I mean, I've been sort of incredibly sort of selfish about it in that I've just done what I've wanted to do, and the numbers have sort of, I mean, we'll just see what happens with the numbers, basically. But it's been, I've been surprised, certainly. I basically try to put something out 5 days a week, try to keep the weekends for the Bratlet. There's plenty of Lego and stuff to play with, so I try to keep that free. But it's just basically, I just wanted to experiment. I wanted to try it. And there was a lot of people in the industry talking about this stuff now and where the whole YouTube thing is going, and none of them are on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like, truly, like none of them. They all have projects that they're working on and they're trying different things, but no one had actually sort of gone out like the majority of YouTubers and just done something just sort of intimate, little personal, incredibly easy, simple. One of the first notes I got was like, well, you should get a better camera and you need to do, and I was like, no, I think you're missing the point, So it's funny. Everyone seems to feel they're an expert on YouTube, and so few people are actually doing it. So I love it. I mean, I guess I feel like it's just another fun sort of experiment in a whole new medium that just basically hasn't been explored by the people in my industry, anyways.
Right. So you don't have any real desire to say create an incredibly complicated video set with LED backlighting, LED front lighting.
And an intern.
16-channel audio mixers.
Yeah, check it out. That's what I would look. I would love that, but it's to me. I feel like you've got it first. You guys built an audience first, right?
Right.
And I think that's my big thing on this thing is like you shouldn't be spending more than you're bringing in from audiences. So if there's an audience dictates that we can do that, that'd be fantastic. Look, I'd love to do that. I'm like. I could play with your backdrop for years.
You can fly down and you can change all the color switchers, the RGB controls just throughout it, depending on what we're talking about. If you're angry about something, make it really bright red.
We're in Florence, Kentucky.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I've never been anywhere near there.
It's about 10 minutes south of Cincinnati.
Yep.
So.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Yeah.
That Cincinnati I'm mildly familiar with, but no, I would love to come down and check it out actually, because I remember when you guys were doing the crowdfunding and stuff for it, I was intrigued.
This is the result.
This is exciting. This stuff is just very exciting to me.
It is, and I think like the very personal kind of communications that you're doing through YouTube are really awesome. And we do some of those videos as well, where Ken's holding up a camera and following me around the office talking about stuff. And then the fact that we can do, like yesterday, we hosted a interview with AMD's Richard Huddy, where we had 6,000-7,000 people come through and watch the stream, and we had multiple cameras and multiple mics and lighting set up, and we did this for a fraction of the cost of what
an actual
big time studios would do, and we're even doing it in reality at a fraction of the cost of what like Leo was doing at the Twit network.
That's true,
right?
Yeah.
So we're downscaling size, and we're losing some levels of quality, but I don't think direct.
I mean, you have me on there, so that's a big drop in quality.
There's your quality gone right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, down the drain.
He's there to make us look better.
People keep sending me petitions
That's it. That's
to
it.
get
He's
rid
the
of them.
before
and
model.
it's
Yeah.
just-
I
ignore
work
them.
cheap, so
I heard
But I
that.
think that's what I love. I saw these guys talk in Cannes. There's a bunch of guys, a bunch of these I would call them kids, talking about their channels with 6 million views and stuff. And one of the great things they said, which really sort of resonated with me, which got me really doing this video diary stuff, was he said people keep asking me about quality. I mean, how do you keep the quality up? And he said you guys spend $1 to $2 million a week on television shows that get seen by one tiny fraction of my audience. And you spend, $1 to $2 million. I spend like $100.
Yeah.
I mean, so my quality is in the engagement, not in the lighting or the cinematography and stuff. And for someone working in the industry, that was a complete paradigm shift for me. Or something that I'm so used to, honing and working and trying to do all this stuff to make everything perfect before it's presented to the world. And advertising and publicists are always trying to hold things back until they're ready to do the launch.
Right.
And it's completely opposite out there. That's just not the way it works. And that was so exciting to me. And that's why this kind of stuff. I mean, again, this is why I jumped in on the crowdfunding for you guys, because this is the hope, I think, for all nerds like myself, is that you can be that, you can take it from the kid in the basement to it actually being like a lifestyle.
There was a specific video you did maybe a month ago or so about the perfect being the enemy of the good.
Yeah, that's a great quote. I didn't make that up, but
Right.
it's a great quote.
And I look at that here as well, and I try to kind of coach all of our other writers about that. About even if if you hold stuff back too long, it loses relevance. You lose focus on it. If you put something out,
Guilty.
even if it's not perfect, you get feedback on it. You iterate on it. You update your benchmark suite. You update the products that are included in the testing as you go forward, right? And I feel like that is a mantra that is applied to not just what we do or what you do, but pretty much anybody. So
my
it's
7th
fascinating.
month review on a motherboard is not a good idea.
I think it is the enemy. Yeah.
Motherboards are the enemy of.
Yeah.
So
Yes, I've taken us off topic. I apologize.
no, that's what we're here. We're just
That's
here.
why you're here.
We're just here talking. So
I'm here to distract
Yes.
and dissuade you from talking about motherboards.
we will.
I'm just happy
we
there's
will get
somebody
to
else
hardware.
here with slightly more hair than me.
That's while it lasts. By the end of this, it could all be gone.
It could, well,
We'll check back. We'll check back every time. If you have one of those rubber
I could have a
skull
camera that I
caps,
could
it's the
just-
time to go get it.
Yeah.
Dr. Evil, do it.
I'm living it.
Yeah. So if this is your first time joining us on our live stream or watching the podcast, you should know that we do record the show live at PCPer.com/live on Wednesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, and other time zones. You can do the math and figure that out yourself. If you are curious and you want to check the schedule, we have it on every page at PCPer.com under upcoming events on the right-hand side of the website. And we'll actually give you a timer for the next event if there's nothing live right now. Or you can go to PCPer.com/subscribe, which is what Ken has brought up here for us. And you will see there the ability to give us your name and email address. And we just send you a little notification when we are about to go on a live stream. So we did that yesterday with the Richard Huddy event, and we did that this evening as well with our podcast with David. So give that a look, if you will. Now let's go ahead and dive into some of the hardware stuff here, starting with that very interview that we did with Richard yesterday. I thought it was 90 minutes long, almost exactly. We gave away like $3,000 worth of gaming hardware, which never hurts in terms of attendance and engagement.
And it was great conversation.
It really was.
Yeah.
I was worried anytime you get he's not in PR. His title is gaming scientist.
Right.
Which is,
I love that title, though. That is just a great.
I
Would
love
you
any,
like to be gaming scientist? I mean, how could you lose with that?
any title that you could just basically make up what your job duties are.
Yeah.
Like it's not assigned in that is great.
I'm going to go do
I
some
want to go
research.
to Bring Your Dad to School
on
Day
this
with the
game.
title of gaming scientist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be a pretty good day for that kid. So we talked about all kinds of stuff, really, and I was worried, when you get somebody in, they weren't launching a product, they weren't announcing anything new, they just wanted to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And they were willing to have that conversation on a live stream, which is fairly rare for some of these companies to be that open about.
Yeah, you kind of get a lot of that raw.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of that was just that's how he felt about it.
Yeah.
He wasn't really
Yeah, because
filtering
that could have gone badly. I mean, he was in a spot. I mean, he had to answer some. There were some tough questions there.
There were a couple of times where I saw him kind of pause.
Yeah.
And I need to think here.
The little devils on the shoulder, the devil and the angel.
Was it the GameWorks? The one I noticed was it GameWorks? The one you brought that up?
Yes.
That was one you could see him not struggling with, but you could see he had to work that one.
The gears were turning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gears were turning. And so, we talked about Mantle. We talked about low-level APIs. We talked about the continuation of something like Mantle even after DirectX 12. And we did talk about GameWorks,
Yep.
which I know, David, you said you had done some reading on over this past week, diving into that thread, if you will, of
Rabbit hole.
Yeah, because I love that stuff. My interest in computers just sort of got smaller and smaller and smaller until I was the idea of building drivers was very exciting to me, and so hearing about this stuff now and how far it's advanced from the Commodore 64 days is fascinating to me.
So for people who don't know, the GameWorks program is an NVIDIA created piece of software that essentially acts as a middleware application. Okay, it is used by game developers to help integrate certain features like face animation or water or certain kinds of ambient occlusion.
Hair. Don't forget hair.
Hair, very
Hair.
important for Josh
Yeah.
and David.
Yeah,
And
which he didn't need either, by the way. The AMD
Richard,
guy,
Richard had no use for it.
Wasn't big for him.
He gave it all to Trez Effects.
He had to donate it for research, I think, is how
dialed
that
the
works.
polygon count all the way down.
FaceWorks was the one that blew me away, though. The FaceWorks aspect of the GameWorks one was that is just stunning.
You saw some of those videos that they had posted on?
Yeah.
Oh, ridiculously gorgeous.
It's good stuff, but the catch is it's a prepackaged set of DLLs.
Right.
Right, it's kind of like a closed box. Like you can use this stuff, you can build it in with your games, but you just have to agree to just stick this kind of prepackaged code into your thing, and you don't know if
there's no flexibility to it. I mean, you can't. Do you have some kind of control over it?
That's kind of what's up for debate.
That's
right?
the debate, right? You can configure.
Don't look at the man behind the curtain.
Right. You can configure it, right? But since that stuff comes from one company, the other company's kind of arguing, well, what if you guys don't necessarily optimize that for our stuff, and a game producer puts it in their game, and now AMD cards don't look as good as NVIDIA cards. That's kind of what the argument is, right?
The way the system used to work exclusively from AMD and NVIDIA would both put out example code, like here's how you can do hair really well, here's how you can do a forward rendering lighting engine really well, and they would post this code publicly in their SDK, and anybody could go download it, right? If you were Epic Games, or you were me or Ken, you could go download the code and play with it and run it. Now with
maybe not you, but certainly Ken.
Yeah, I wouldn't understand it, so I'd make Ken do it and then make it work for me.
But we could download it.
I could download it and look at it and go, ooh,
totally
nice.
download it and not do anything with it.
Yes,
Exactly. Yeah. So what changed with GameWorks is that they package it as DLLs without the source code, and they made it less of an SDK and more of a licensable middleware application. And initially, developers some of the major developers had problems with it, and it took pushing from developers and a little bit of wrist slapping, I guess, from AMD, where NVIDIA started to release the source code to certain developers under certain licenses and whatever, right? So the problem that AMD had was not that there was any specific instance of NVIDIA's GameWorks code hindering their own GPU's performance, but that there was the potential for it to
could happen. Yeah.
And what did that mean for the industry? What did that mean for gamers? AMD's always been the company to throw out the open and freely available open source model of things. And
Sorry, you mean to get rid of it or to embrace it?
To embrace it.
Yeah, okay.
They've always been the one trumpeting out there. So while NVIDIA did PhysX, which is a GPU accelerated physics package that only ran on NVIDIA GPUs, and AMD would come out and talk about bullet physics, which used OpenCL and would run on all GPUs. And it was a good idea and it was a good theory, right? We don't people don't want to use physics software that only runs on 60% of the market or 65% of the market. You want it to run on 100%. So OpenCL would do that. The problem is if you go back and look, and maybe somebody will correct me, but I know of way more games that implement PhysX than implement bullet physics.
There was a lot. Like I didn't even hear about.
I didn't hear about any, and I'm sure there are some, or at least a couple. I don't know if they're major titles or lower,
Everything
titles,
was PhysX.
Yeah,
Like everything you'd ever heard of.
yeah, anything that was actually GPU accelerated.
Basically, yeah.
But the problem with writing code for these things anyways, though, is it's so low level, isn't it, that they sort of, don't they kind of need to be tied to the hardware? I mean, to truly get the most out of everything, you need to write for that specific hardware, that architecture.
Kind of Mantle in a nutshell, in that your API is close to the metal. If we look at like the past consoles, the developers were able to just get really, really close to the metal to extract the most performance with the lowest software overhead. But with these, GameWorks and some AMD stuff, they have to kind of put it up another notch because, well, Windows and I guess Linux to a degree.
I mean, the operating system's
you
in
do
the way,
need more software in between there just because they have to address so much hardware.
Yeah.
Now, does Steam come into play in any of this? Will these affect any of those?
Steam is no. I mean, that's pretty much at the consumer-facing end, right?
That's
if you get
distribution.
Into Steam OS,
Well, that's it. It's purely just distribution.
Yeah, possibly SteamOS.
Yeah, so Steam OS is even going at kind of a different angle, right? Where the Valve is trying to kind of pull people away from using Windows.
Yeah.
Right. About it being a closed ecosystem. I think a lot of it started when Windows 8 first launched, and the idea for Microsoft was going to be that all applications, including games, had to come from the Windows App Store, and so Valve was not a fan of that, and so they kind of started the idea of a gaming specific operating system based on Linux.
Yeah.
Now, right now, what's interesting about Steam, I think it's great.
I think that's great.
But there's no DirectX on Linux.
Yep.
Which makes Mantle a great possibility.
It makes Mantle a great possibility because right now all you have is OpenGL, and OpenGL is the API that will work with both AMD and NVIDIA and Intel hardware, whoever's using that, right? So, actually, Richard did say on the stream yesterday that they haven't committed 100% to making a Mantle version for Linux, but that they are definitely considering it.
He hinted at it, though.
If there's enough people that want it, they will make it.
Yeah.
They're definitely talking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have anything solid, but it's a big topic of discussion right now, so that generally makes AMD a little interested.
Yeah.
He seemed to imply that there might be something in the works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm almost sure they have something working. They're either waiting for a certain performance level to hit before they announce it, or a certain partnership announcement to hit. Maybe they have it working in Linux, but they don't have it working with SteamOS. Maybe they need that SteamOS integration in like a package update before they're willing to come out and kind of announce it and really talk about it.
Now, does SteamOS exist yet, or is that still something that we're just talking about?
No, it's
out.
The beta exists.
Is it still in beta technically?
Yeah, it's a beta. Yeah. It's free. You can download it. You can install it.
Yep. We did that.
And it runs on what?
It'll run on anything, really. So when they first shipped out their prototype Steam machines, it was running on a Haswell processor and an NVIDIA GTX graphics card of varying quality levels.
Anything that can run Linux, conceivably, you could compile that and run on.
I mean, you don't even have to compile
I'm going to run it on Spark.
They already have packages for
they have packages
most,
you can install it.
Yeah. They have packages for pretty much anything you'd have.
So it's a thing, but no one is actually selling a Steam machine, right? Yet. Right. So a lot of partners were announced at CES that would eventually sell Steam machines, but Valve, in their kind of typical fashion of "we'll do it when we're damn ready," is holding everything back. Right. So, and actually, I know a lot of these system vendors.
So Half-Life 3 is going to come out when SteamOS is out of beta.
It will actually only be on SteamOS.
Confirmed.
That's how they're going to sell it.
Confirmed exclusive.
Yeah.
It's so. I mean, the whole interview yesterday was really kind of eye-opening in other areas. We talked about talked about Mantle and SteamOS and Linux. We went into G-Sync versus Adaptive Sync or the FreeSync model that they had. I'm going to have a news post that goes up tomorrow that kind of looks at the 5 or 6 kind of key points that he made that I think are new bits of information, or at least new-ish, that are worth kind of consolidating into a story and linking to those specific time slots in the interview, because 90 minutes is a long time to invest, but I think all of the information that is discussed, including questions from the audience, is really compelling.
Yeah, it was all very good.
Yeah.
Well,
I thought it was kind of interesting to see how much.
Got,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, David.
Sorry, I just that position that he's got, that that gaming scientist thing. I just thought that was interesting for AMD to make that such a focus. That they're actually committing a person and resources to making sure that this stuff is speaking to the developers.
Yeah, and it was a new position they created for it.
Yep.
Right, and at the beginning of the video, he details kind of what the goal is to interface between consumers, product developers, and the actual software vendors. The developers themselves. And AMD has done a good job of acquiring or reacquiring the right talent and the right people. Richard Huddy just being one of them, right? Richard Huddy was at Intel and NVIDIA and ATI and 3D Labs.
And online poker.
And online poker, yes. And then who else did they got back recently, Josh? They've
Keller.
Keller on the CPU side.
He's the big guns, literally.
And Raja as well came back.
He works out.
Dude, he does. He looks like Kevin. He looks like Kevin Sorbo. Look up Jim Keller. Get a picture. He's Kevin Sorbo.
That claim has been made many times before.
Yes.
So you haven't checked out. If you have not checked out that interview, go to PCPer.com. Look for the post. We did upload the video to our YouTube channel this afternoon, so it is available for you to rewatch as many times as you want. Just loop it if you feel like it, I guess.
But be sure to watch the ad right before for the full length.
Yeah, even if it's a 13-minute ad, which sometimes gets played, like for Intel, like Xeon server infrastructures.
Do you find that do the ads make sense for what you're doing?
They are getting better at it.
Yeah.
Although I'm curious how much of it is about the channel versus knowing like my habits on YouTube. Right, knowing more about me, the fact that I am a technologically oriented person.
Yeah.
Right. Right now, I'm getting tons of Verizon
But the ones
ads.
that are disturbing are the Hair Club for Men and Viagra.
You get a lot of those. See, I don't see those, Josh. Now we know the answer.
No, I never get them either.
Now we know it's not channel based. It's definitely Google account based.
Yep.
Got to change some of those statistics on there, Josh.
Yeah.
I
let's
love
quickly.
my son watching Minecraft videos, and then up come the most violent video game ads just before them, because they assume that it's me because he's signed in as me.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah. Whoops. Yeah. We've seen some odd videos that come up at the end of a video where it's like, you might also like, where it brings up the matrix of videos at the end of one.
Yeah.
And it's like the thumbnail is pretty much pornographic. And I'm like, this was not related to GPU graphics at all. Like, I don't get it.
Because I read the book on
channels that would
about Google.
expect you to believe that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I read this thing on the Google, so the history of Google and their early attempts to try to match ads to things like newspaper articles, and how when they would report like an airline crash. And then in the airline crash ad, there would be an ad for airline flights to the same places that had just gone down and stuff. So they're trying to work out those algorithms.
Come fly Malaysian Air.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Looking for your dead relatives? Fly cheap.
It's horrible.
Ancestry.com.
Oh, we're all going to hell.
Yeah,
Yes.
pretty much.
Oh, I think we're already there.
Pretty much. Let's talk about, Josh, you posted a review of the Gigabyte G1 Sniper A88X. This is an FM2 motherboard. It's got Sniper in the name. Tell me what that means and why.
It's mass hypnosis. I didn't actually write a thing. I've been working on that for the past 7 months to effectively make everybody think that it's there and it's not. So what you're reading is really what you think about it.
Oh.
Does that explain it all?
Did one of your sons write this?
He's like Inception.
Yeah.
He's
Or would that
planted
be
a sniper in our
deception?
head.
Anyway.
So tell me about the product.
The Gigabyte. I got this thing right next to me.
Great.
Yes, you can see my shoulder very, very well in my dirty office, but like that has changed.
It has not.
So this is the G1 Sniper A88X, based on the AMD A88X chipset. It's their latest and greatest chipset. It's a Southbridge anymore.
Right.
It's got 8 SATA 6G ports. It's got 4 USB 3.0 native that they licensed from Renesas. It's AMD's an interesting place right now with FM2 Plus. They cannot charge a premium for the product that they have because performance in CPU wise is not that fantastic as compared to what Intel has in the same price points. However, the graphics portion is as good, if not significantly better, at the price point, because I think the only thing from Intel that really competes to it is the Iris Pro, and you're looking at that attached to a 4770 type class CPU, so you're looking at $300, I think, just for the processor. While with AMD, you do get a decent product for $179 that gives you really good graphics and a solid quad core performance. But what they're really kind of pushing is a lot of value for the underlying technology, and this comes in the form of these types of motherboards. Now, the G1 Sniper series from Gigabyte are pretty high end. They're gamer and enthusiast oriented, and a lot of these products on the Intel side go for $200 and above. You get one of their high-end ones. I think it's plus $300 for the latest, and you get high-end audio. You get the better networking. You get a ton of power phases. You just get all of these things that are packed into a board with the black, green, and kind of silver color schema. Or is that Shima?
Whichever you want.
Oh, thank you. And they had to kind of put this into a much smaller and more cost-effective product. And so that's what we have here is the G1 Sniper A88X. It comes in around $109. You can buy it online. It has a lot of kind of higher-end features to it, but it's not really a super high-end board. Now, where they really cut down the price is in terms of a lot of extras. It's still got the Realtek Ethernet instead of maybe like one of the Qualcomm Killer NIC or the Intel Gigi controllers with the software stack that goes with this. Instead, it just relies primarily on the properties of the Southbridge, the I/O controller, and I think that they add. No, they don't even add, a secondary USB 3.0 controller. It's kind of what you see is what you get. The power delivery system is not as robust as you would expect or would hope for in terms of overclocking, but because Kaveri, the chip that goes in here, is not a great overclocker, it's not something you terribly have to worry about. So it's got a 4+2 phase instead of a higher end like 6+2 that some of the more expensive boards have. But I'll tell you what, there's not that many more expensive boards for this product until, of course, Asus comes around. But I'm pretty sure Gigabyte does not want me to talk about that at the moment.
So let me ask you something. Do you think? I think we might have talked about this after Computex. Is there a place in the AMD market for high-end FM2 motherboards, though?
No. You simply will not be able to sell a $200 plus motherboard for FM2 when your highest end processor is at retail without any kind of special or sale going on, which is pretty much all the time,
right,
is $179. So you're not going to purchase a motherboard that is more expensive than the processor, especially when you start looking at the Intel side, when you can get a cheap Z97, add that in with $150 to $180 chip, and you'll get a lot better CPU performance and a better gaming platform if you add in a standalone graphics card. So AMD is really constrained with what they can do, and their partners even more so. And so this is what we kind of get is, it is more enthusiast aimed in terms of the styling, but it doesn't give you a whole lot of features. Now, the one thing that they really, really pushed is that of the audio. And this is the one thing that they succeeded very, very well in. As you know, audio is getting kind of hot again, and interestingly so. People do expect a little bit better sound from motherboards. People are buying fewer and fewer standalone sound cards. And this is an area where they think that there's going to be some interest in. So, of course, the features they have is it's separated from the rest of the PCB physically. So it only has certain points of connection that are highly filtered. So things like ring, interference from other high-speed parts on the power and ground circuits will be filtered out, and you get the best sound possible. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh.
No,
Okay.
he switched to the wrong shot on that, but
bad Ken. It still uses a Realtek codec.
Okay.
But it's one of the higher end versions with like a signal to noise ratio of like 109 decibel. It's all lots of gold plating in the connections. It's got higher end caps than what you would usually see. So power supplied and to the chip. Because if you know how signals work, the higher the signal, not the higher, but the more, I don't know, what's that?
Frequency?
Amplitude
Oh, okay. I
of
gotcha.
a signal will require more power. And sometimes you can get some clipping and whatnot because the capacitors just kind of run out of power in there in these certain signals. And they're hoping to get around this by, larger caps and better quality ones. And finally, the last thing that they did is you have a swappable op amp. Now, some years ago, I did some testing with a standalone sound card that you could swap out the op amps, and you could really change the color of the sound. I know that sounds strange, but it's true. Change the color of the sound coming to you by
Is it like
swapping.
changing the colors of the wind?
Exactly. Or changing
the colors
sound
of the
of the
background
light.
of the PC Perspective Studio.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been
never
taking a
happens.
lot of mushrooms lately, and I've been seeing
That's
colors.
where this review came from.
Yeah.
Finally, we'll have to get you some more of that.
Yes.
So who buys it? Who wants this card?
This, I'm. That's a good question. People who want good sound, not spend a whole lot of money. Probably those who just are willing to use the integrated graphics, who may think later on possibly go up with a mid-range video card to add into this to make it a decent gaming system, because this is one of the main reasons that, well, maybe not one of the main reasons, but it certainly is a reason that AMD is pushing Mantle. Mantle allows gaming cards and whatnot to perform better even on a lower powered CPU. Now, AMD is really pushing HSA. Unfortunately, we don't have a killer app yet for HSA. But if you really look at the potential performance of a Kaveri APU, the floating point performance is outstanding as compared to pretty much everything else out there. I mean, they sacrificed 1/3 of the die. In fact, no, it's 50% of the die.
Right.
To graphics.
We've talked about Kaveri before. Like, we know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, the potential there is huge.
It sucks. It sucks for their partners that all these boards depend on that. Right.
It kind of does.
Making a board with the Sniper brand, which is obviously an Enthusiast brand, is going to be a struggle. So.
Yeah, but it's $109. So
That's
overall,
pretty cheap.
it's a good board.
Yeah.
I mean, it overclocks okay, but I mean, you're not expecting huge out of Kaveri. The package is very, very minimal. You can read the article and see all the rest of the features. Again, the sound is the biggest thing. But I don't know if you've ever noticed this.
One last
Ryan,
question for you. Hold on, I got one last question for you. How many SATA cables does it come with?
Yes.
It comes with 4, I believe.
No.
Adequate. Okay.
Adequate.
Yeah.
But have you seen
5
how
stars.
skinny these motherboard manuals are getting?
They don't even need to really come with
It's a
one.
pamphlet.
Who reads?
You got a
PDFs.
manual?
It's a dead tree.
It's like 1/100th of War and Peace, if even that.
PDF, baby.
Well, how many,
It's out of date as soon as you get it, anyways.
Yeah.
yeah,
Just like the driver
it's
CD.
like why putting driver. Yeah, I
Yeah.
complain all the time about that. First of all, they should put them on USB drives,
That's true too.
thumb drives instead of CDs.
Yeah.
Because I don't have an optical drive in any of my systems
Yeah.
anymore.
But the driver CD is out of date, like as they're putting it in the box at the
Yeah.
factory.
It's even
ridiculous.
more funny
that
with
was a bad
graphics
thing
cards.
about this board is most of the people who are getting it from distributors and like guys like Newegg, they've got the previous BIOS that does not support the very processor.
Whoops.
So they have to somehow get an earlier Richland APU.
that crap.
Oh, that's
and
horrible.
Flash it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really
So
annoying.
that's a knock.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. I want to talk about something else off topic here. Well, off.
I don't want to talk about this anymore.
I don't want to talk about that motherboard anymore. We're done talking about that motherboard. And instead, I think a lot of people have questions. I know when we did when the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One came out.
Yep.
In particular, the PlayStation 4, you could replace the drive in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it came with a standard. Was it a 5400 or 7200? It was a 5400 RPM drive. And
We had just reviewed a hybrid
yes,
5400 RPM drive from Seagate.
right.
at the
And
time.
we tested that, and we tested an SSD to like kind of see how load game installs or boot times or
Yeah.
loading performance or level performance would change. And we get a lot of questions all the time still today about hybrid hard drives for a desktop.
Yep.
And we reviewed one this week. You did. This
a
is
hybrid
a
hard drive for a
Seagate
desktop.
SSHD,
Yep.
4 terabytes. So it's a 4 terabyte hard drive with what attached?
So, like the other Seagate hybrid models, which previous to this were all 2.5-inch drives.
Right.
Right. They were all meant for laptops, mobile computing, that kind of thing. This guy is basically the same exact controller technology, flash memory. Everything is almost identical.
Okay.
It's just grafted into a larger desktop class hard drive.
What capacity of the SSD are we talking about?
That's what the problem was that we discovered in this review. It's still only 8 gig of cache. So basically, it's an 8 gig single flash package. Now,
Right here.
for stuff that's inside that package, it acts more like an SSD, right? But the key is,
So what test can I show them that will indicate the best case performance?
best case, you could look at the PC Mark stuff.
Okay.
That we did. We did repeated runs of PC Mark, which is really the only easy way to test caching. Because you're trying to evaluate, if you run any kind of a synthetic benchmark, it's testing the whole drive.
Right.
Or it's just not a consistent kind of thing where you can do repeatable things.
Sure.
Whereas a hybrid drive excels at doing repeatable things quickly. Right?
So is the base performance of the hard drive in line with other 4 terabyte drives
Yes.
that we've seen?
Yeah, it's
So
a good-
at minimum, you're getting that.
At minimum, you're getting desktop class hard
Okay.
drive performance, right? But the problem is now you're in desktop space. So you're doing things like installing games that are probably going to be larger than a game that you might install on a laptop,
Right.
right? So we installed,
Battlefield 4.
yep. So we did Battlefield 4, and as simple a task as installing Battlefield 4 and then playing it once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, we weren't like playing the
So-
whole game. We were just loading a level.
We have this graph on here, and it's a little
Yeah.
bit complicated. If you read the review that he wrote, there's a big discussion about what it is. But give us a quick outline. Like
Right.
the blue,
The blue line is your boot time for a solid state drive, and
just
then
like a base level,
like a
solid state
base
drive.
level. Then actually not even that quick of one,
Okay.
right? The red lines there are boot times where the operating system was on this SSHD. Okay, and then when you skip to the green lines that are kind of intermixed there, that's us firing up Battlefield 4.
Directly loading into a map.
Yeah, and we launched it, and we did how long does it take to launch the game and go straight into a map to the point where you can escape the
So the first
cutscene.
the first thing we see is that red line here, where the first boot time.
Yeah, so the first time we tried to boot the operating system on this SSHD, it was basically pure hard drive because we had just cloned the operating system over, right? So that's how long it was going to take you to boot if it was just a hard drive, or at least pretty close to it.
Sure.
Probably. And then if you notice, we rebooted a couple of times, and it pretty much kind of eventually gets down to SSD speed, right? It's pretty quick. The problem was that then we want to, do a game install.
No, this is
And
not
then-
installing it. This was just loading up the game. It
Well,
had already
but-
been installed.
No, we did the install.
And this first iteration?
The first one was an install.
Okay.
Yeah, we did the install, and then we fired up the game for the first time. There you have it. It's like kind of a long time.
So it took 52.6 seconds to load up the first this particular
this particular
Battlefield
map.
4
Yes, and then we exited out of the game and tried it again.
And it took 37.3 seconds.
Right, which is probably around how long it would take on that system to boot up or to load that game on an SSD.
Okay.
Okay, and it kind of repeats that. But the problem was that merely by installing the game, we caused some of the operating system stuff to roll out of the cache because the cache is only 8 gig, and that's not a lot of space compared to the game, right? The game itself is what's the total?
I think Battlefield 4 is like 40 gigs, 38 gigs.
Right, so you've got a 40 gigabyte game, and the cache is only 8 gig. Now, granted, you're not loading the entire game every single time, but you're loading enough of it to cause the other stuff to get pushed out. And the whole purpose of the cache is so that when you hopefully go back and reboot your system, you still get a fast boot time, but we weren't, is the thing. And then just by rebooting, we then subsequently got a slower game load time after we rebooted because, again, the drive tried to cache that.
And then at the end, we saw this kind of oscillation.
Yeah, and then after we did that enough times, the drive kind of got a little confused a couple of times. Wasn't really bad, but there was one time where we repeated it a few times in a row, the boot time, and it actually was kind of slow in the middle.
So, I mean, what does this indicate? That hybrid hard drives are just a bad idea?
No, not at all. It's just that hybrid hard drives with a cache that's too small for what you're doing is a bad idea. You need
if you have a 4 terabyte drive and you use Intel's SRT,
the SRT caching,
they have RST and SRT, so
I know
I get confused.
It's very confusing.
But
there's basically a caching.
You put your own SSD in there.
Yeah, you connect your own SSD.
Too many TLAs. I'm getting overload here. 3-letter acronym.
SSD,
They're all
RST,
TSR.
TSA.
So here's the thing. This drive runs
WTF.
at like a $30 premium over a standard 4 terabyte drive.
Okay.
Okay. So you can take that $30 and kind of put it towards, assuming you have a system that can do this SRT caching which is the past now 3 generations of Intel motherboards, or at least the decent spec desktop motherboards. Chances are you probably have this ability. You take that $30 that you save by just buying a standard drive, and you buy something like, maybe your motherboard has an MSATA port, so we just reviewed like a Plextor MSATA drive, or you just buy a standard 2.5-inch
30 gig, 40 gig.
30 gig, 40 gig, maybe 60 gig if you find a good deal, that kind of thing. Doesn't have to be a blazing fast drive, but basically the bigger the better, up to 64 gig, because that's the limit for the SRT. Like, it just won't work higher than 64 gig. You do that, you connect it, and now you have the same effect as what this drive does, except you're doing it yourself.
Less roll off.
You have the less chance that things are going to roll.
Less roll off.
Yeah, if you can do 64 gig compared to 8 gig, right? Chances are, I mean, the whole entirety of Battlefield 4 and the Windows operating system install can fit within 64 gig. If those are the only 2 things you're doing, chances are it's all in the cache.
Yeah.
Right.
David, I'm curious. Do you do video edit? You do a lot of video editing with your YouTube videos? Are you doing a lot of that stuff yourself personally?
I mean, I do a lot of editing, and I did a lot of editing with the film. Not so much with the YouTube stuff, because I just try to keep that simple. But I'm such a snob on this stuff now. I'm just SSD.
But it's your computer, right? It's your computer that you're doing it on. Like you may not be tweaking and editing and stuff, but you're just on a MacBook with an SSD. Actually, weren't you on the MacBook with an SSD a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I got the new one.
Oh, there you go. Now you're going to faster SSD.
Yeah, the hard drives. There's something that I find offensive about the whole spinning platter thing. I feel like we should be so far beyond that now.
It's rust, man. It's just rust.
Feels too much like a record player.
It does. It does. I always think of that Fisher-Price record player that had the little things that would click.
That's perfect.
Terrible.
That is totally it.
Think.
Because invariably that's what happens. I end up with these bloody drives that I've spent a fortune on, and they're just they're not even paperweights. You still have to put a nail through them to make sure no one's going to steal your film when you throw them out. I mean, I love the idea of hybrid drives simply because I'm hoping it'll drive the cost of true SSDs down.
Yeah.
It's funny because anytime, like the very first thing, if Intel sends us a system for a review, or a builder sends us a system for a review, or we get like something like a Sony Tap 21, which is an all-in-one computer.
Yep.
Right, it's essentially an ultrabook hardware inside, a 27-inch screen, 1080p, whatever. And the very first thing you do when you turn it on is you go, "Man, it's taking forever. I bet this has a standard hard drive in it."
And it
sure
does.
enough, like that's the first thing you notice about it. It's an immediate turnoff to that product and to that whole.
You can't go back
experience of
after
using
it. You just can't do it.
Yeah, you just can't.
You cannot do it. And so every
And then they
system
make it
that comes
worse
through
by
here,
being cheap and putting it in a 5400 RPM drive.
Yeah.
Oh, it's green. It's a green drive.
Yeah, I'm with the green drives.
That's only good for mass storage stuff. You're just putting a bunch of
So, I
files
mean,
on it.
We have backup machines here that are Pegasus 4 bay that have 3 terabyte drives in them that we use for backing up of all the video that we're editing. But anything we're actually actively editing, it is done on an SSD. If you have to scrub through 1080p video in a timeline in Premiere on a hard drive,
It's painful.
Ken had to do that. And we tried RAID hard drives for a while, and I
It's
kept
still
breaking
painful.
that.
It's still
Oh my god, the
Still
raids! I
gonna
had
cry.
so many problems with the raids. I've just had
Yes,
just disasters with those things.
Ryan has very bad luck.
You and Ryan both.
We're like brothers then. I broke so many RAID arrays.
I've had to do
Yeah.
I've had to do forensic data recovery of Ryan's raids in the past.
It's my superpower is destroying raids.
Sweet. My superpower
amazing.
is fixing them.
Nice.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, I think we actually talked about that. I think when
We
this
did.
happened, I think we actually discussed you possibly going through doing that because I just it drove me crazy. No, it feels even just backing up to hard drives. I just go like I'm going to back up to a hard drive. Like they're the things that fail all the time. I'm like,
Yeah.
Back up to many hard drives.
Yes.
well, that's it. I mean, look, another thing in that Google book that I really enjoyed was the way when they first started up, they created their system to work with like crappy repurposed drives. Like
Yes.
their entire operating, their entire network of drives was designed to fail.
They put out a very, very interesting white paper years back on data failure rates, like a bunch of statistical data on failure rates from different vendors and what how temperature affected them and how infant mortality, like if they failed early or if they failed late, that sort of thing. Just an insane amount of statistics.
When you go through millions of hard drives, you probably get some pretty good statistics.
And they put out this just very educational white paper on it. It's just like I forget what the title was.
I know, and I know everyone, they're evil and all the rest of it. I love them. I just they love data.
Yeah, they do good stuff with it.
And it's like they go, "Ooh, look at this," and they sort of throw this stuff out there, and I just.
If they ever actually prove that Google is a completely evil company, I'm totally screwed because everything I do from my phone to our emails to our, I'm done for.
So just get used to being evil, Ryan. It's an easy
Well, that's
solution.
it. I figure like if they're evil, then fine. I'm a stormtrooper.
Yeah. It means we can't aim and we're gonna die early.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we knew that.
We get to get off 20 shots, miss everybody, get hit in the chest once, and the armor is useless.
And you
move
don't
on.
shoot first.
You always shoot first.
Not the stormtroopers.
Yeah, you got to. It's the only chance you got.
No, it's true.
a
Stormtroopers
couple
never
of shots
shoot
off to
first.
the
They're always,
clouds
They
first.
have to take out the first layer first before they. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Revolutionary War tactics.
Pretty much.
You guys go first.
That's right.
Let's see. We got a couple other news stories we're going to get through here. I did update. We talked about the Titan Z review that I posted last week. $3,000 video card. It came up in our discussion with Richard Huddy as well yesterday. I had some requests for overclocking testing and looking at some other aspects of like, can you overclock it and what does that do to clock speeds? And we found some interesting information, right? I knew immediately that the clock speed variance with this card was going to be a little bit higher than other NVIDIA cards. And if you look at this graph here, there's 4 different metrics that we're showing. There's a green line, which is the Titan Z at bone stock, right? This is out of the box. This is what we got. And then as you move up the line, blue, yellow to red, it's us changing settings a little bit to overclock. So at stock settings, the clock rates kind of circulated. They started at about 1,000 megahertz, and they kind of went down to as low as I think that's like 780 or so, and then averaged out at I believe it was 794. No, I'm sorry, 894. I'll have to look again. But you can kind of see here where the kind of general trend of this is. If you increase the amount of power that the card is allowed to use by just 12%, you get the blue line, which is much, much higher up there in terms of its average clock speed and thus in performance that you get. And in fact, if you look at the second graph here that shows those average clock speeds, you'll see that the green line is stock again. 894 megahertz was your average clock. Just not even changing any of the clock speed settings, but changing the power settings to allow it to use more power by 12%. You got a full 100 megahertz frequency increase on the Titan Z, which obviously is going to equate to quite a bit of performance increase. And then our highest overclock is we were able to hit an average clock speed of 1,074. To be fair, at that clock speed, fan speeds very high, very loud.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, but what about
you going to kill
variance?
it?
Isn't the variance when you start going higher, it decreased significantly, and so you've got a more compressed graph, which means probably better overall, feeling.
So this is all a result of NVIDIA choosing to maintain a sensible PCI Express power draw.
Yeah, they followed the spec.
Following the spec of PCI Express. This card has a TDP of 375 watts.
Yep.
The AMD card of the same caliber essentially has a TDP of 500 watts. So that's a dramatic difference.
Mm-hmm. That's a space heater.
Yeah. If you allow the Titan Z to get up to 500 watts, it can get close to the performance of the 295X2, but it's still twice the price, and it's louder.
Yeah.
And because they're using an air cooler and AMD is using a water cooler, right? So there's a lot of different, back and forth on what they decided to do. Now the problem is actually this graph here. If you look at Metro Last Light at 4K, you'll see here that the Titan Z at stock, which is the black line, versus the Titan Z at overclocked, which is the green line, it essentially catches the 295X2. This is just one game, but it did a very good job of that. Now, I posted this big, long update because people in comments are people on the internet, so they don't understand things a lot of times. And they started to complain about, well, you railed on AMD over the last 2 years for having a variable clock speed, with their 290 and 290X. And you weren't mad at NVIDIA for doing the same thing. And the difference is NVIDIA advertises the clock speed of the Titan Z as within this range.
Yep.
Right? They tell you, here's our base, and the clock speed never gets down to the base. And here's our expected boost clock.
So they're exceeding their
They're
rating.
actually exceeding their expected boost clock by about 20 megahertz.
Right.
So it's right there in line. Whereas what AMD did when they first launched the 290X was they said the clock speed is 1 gigahertz, up to 1 gigahertz.
And it actually
ran closer to 800 almost all of the time.
Yep.
And so my complaint there was that if it's going to do that, that's fine, but you need to define that up front. What number it will never go below and what number we should expect to see it at.
Yep.
Up to is a worthless statistic.
I think Intel did it best with their base and their boost. It's pretty damn honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
they tell you
NVIDIA did that
exactly.
as well with theirs, right? And there's a little bit of variance card to card, but at least they're being kind of upfront about it.
Yeah.
It was an interesting thing. And also, if you look at that graph with the green line versus the red, yellow, and blue, the green line, the fact that the clock speed's going up and down, even though it's within spec, will cause more jitter and stutter in the gaming experience because frames are fundamentally being rendered at different rates at different time periods because, within a few seconds, you are jumping from a clock speed here of 780 and you're within 20, 30 seconds, you're up to 900 and something.
Yeah, so that's going to change the frame rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. It almost looks like they're just kind of being a little too conservative, trying to dial back that power use.
They are. They're trying to stay within that spec of 375.
And it just got it to the point where it caused it to vary more than you usually see it vary. So as soon as you even tweak just the minimum power, right, that was enough to bring it right up to a
I
narrower
feel like
line.
this is the first real example of what GPU Boost was designed to do.
Yeah.
Right? What it was designed to give you best performance possible within a power envelope.
Yep. And
all
it
the
was
other
doing
cards were, the power envelope was much lower.
Yeah.
And the coolers were able to keep the GPUs at a level that wasn't really an issue.
Right.
David, do you have any
how does
need
it work
for
when you're running that fast? Like when you start pushing these things as far as you can push them, what are the consequences there? I mean, obviously heat, but can you run these things at that speed all the time and just not worry about it, or
at the overclock speed or at the stock speed?
At the overclock speed.
You can. I was able to run. I don't want to say for indefinite, but I reran this for about 45 minutes at the overclock speed.
Yeah.
And it was stable. The drawback is power consumption heat generated, right? So turning your room into a sauna, and noise, right? So that the Titan Z has a single center-mounted fan that has to cool those two massive heat sinks over those two very large GPUs, and so it has to spin pretty damn quick.
You have one fan about that big around,
yeah,
and it's cooling 500 watts.
Right. Whereas on the
if you're going to overclock like that, then you're going to need more than the stock for that. Then
and AVGA actually sells a version of the Titan Z
that has a water block.
That has a water block built on.
Yeah.
Now you have to. It's not like a custom ready to go.
Yeah, you have to have a system with a radiator and a pump and stuff like that.
See, this is the stuff I miss so much.
Barbs.
Like I'm like, this is the problem with having Macs.
That's true.
If you open up your laptop, can you put a 500-watt video card inside?
I can pour water on it. I can pour that. And
with a hammer and a bit of lube to get that 500
the bucket's almost
video card
empty.
in there, but
hurry up, finish that level.
Maybe if we try
super
LN2,
cooled isopropyl alcohol. I can cool this damn thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Go to the grocery store.
I used to. I mean, this is the stuff I miss. I remember like sort of going on College Street in Toronto. Used to be just all the little sort of shops that sold all the little bits and pieces for these things, and just going in and spending way too much money trying different things. And I remember like overclocking. You know, you'd overclock the CPU, and basically you just burn a hole in the board.
Well, yeah.
Nowadays on the video cards, I mean, it used to be where if you overclocked them too far, you got like weird like artifacts and like, you know, polygons would be drawn in the wrong places. That's not so much now anymore, right?
It'll still happen. Like that's the artifacting you see before your system crashes. Like if you were overclocking to a point where it's right on the edge,
right,
you'll see artifacting, you'll see textures tearing.
Yeah, but like with these cards though, I guess my point is like it's kind of more of a thermal thing now. It's like more of a like you can only like on the Titan Z, right? You were basically pushing it until like it was really drawn like 500 watts.
Yep.
Right. So
well, if we kind of think about these massive CPUs and GPUs, is that any small point of failure will cause that to fail.
Yeah.
And unlike perhaps older ASICs, that you can keep pumping power and power and power to it, and it won't fail, and then suddenly you're well past the thermal specifications of something like in the 1980s that didn't have a heat sink on it.
Right.
It just was the plastic cover that was dissipating heat. So yeah, it's now we do have with the finer processes and better cooling. When something fails, it's not going to burn a hole.
Well, and it's sort of a more accepted practice now, isn't it? I mean, it's back in the day, it was it truly was people, pushing the chips beyond what they were ever meant to do.
Oh man, I mean they're buying crystals to stinking increase the clock speed by.
I remember that. Yeah,
3 megahertz.
Yeah.
3 megahertz. My
no,
had
3 hertz.
Hey, 3 megahertz was good when you're only running at 12.
Yeah, 10 to 12.
That's a 25% overclock. Right there.
Yeah.
But I mean, back then you had to work at it. It was not you just fire up the UFEI BIOS and go boop.
Yeah,
okay,
now you
I'm
just change.
now.
Now you just change a couple of numbers.
Jeremy, it's called progress.
That's true. That's
bag
true.
it off.
Get off my lawn. Yeah, there's a line. Okay.
Yeah.
I remember when I had to buy a graphite pencil to do traces.
No, I had to do that too. That's not that
true.
bad.
Yeah, I was there.
At E3, there was a project that apparently leaked out or came out called a SteamBoy, which is interesting. I still am not 100% sure it's a real thing.
Is this a Flavor Flav product?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a giant clock where...
SteamBoy!
The idea is a handheld Steam box, Steam machine.
Which will probably happen at some point.
I hope it's real. It looks very pretty.
It does. It does.
But if you're going to call it SteamBoy, it should have a wrist strap on it.
What?
Pip-Boy?
Oh yeah.
Jeez.
Wow.
So if you look at this picture, this mock-up, really, it's got those what do we call them?
The blue and the red, the blue and the orange portals for your fingers.
The touch pads.
Right? Gabe's nipples?
Yes.
So they're the same haptic touch pads that exist on the Steam controller today that doesn't actually exist. It's only in prototype form.
Yeah.
That Ken and I got to use when we went to CES. It was actually pretty cool to use it. And it obviously you've got some arrow buttons. You've got your X, Y, A, B buttons as if you were on an Xbox. And this was apparently using a quad-core x86 processor, 4 gigs of RAM, and 32 gigs of built-in storage. But in terms of other information, not really much else here. This kind of reminds me of like an NVIDIA Shield competitor device.
Sure.
Because you know how successful that was.
Yeah, that's true.
They're having to give them away.
Do you think this can exist and be an interesting product and not just be like doing the Steam, like home network streaming stuff? Like,
Well, I can see one usage for it. Because that middle part is a touch screen. You put in the Steam Big Picture. And so this just becomes an entire controller for your TV, which means that unlike certain other portable gaming consoles, which sort of had a touchpad, which was part of your controls and a screen, this one might actually work if they sort of could pull that off.
Yeah, I could see that.
So an incredibly
That's the only
expensive
usage I
remote.
see.
Yeah, it's
an incredibly expensive
With 32
quad-core
gigs of
remote
memory.
control.
Do you know how many presets I can put on that son of a bitch?
Oh, come on, mice ship with that nowadays.
that's true.
I love the idea. I have almost little. I have an incredibly low amount of confidence that would ever be released as a product.
Yeah.
It's so it's I like trying to hit the mainstream with that. I just it seems really niche to me.
It is niche of niche. Linux
yeah.
gaming, now mobile Linux gaming.
It's niche of niche following on the Wii stuff.
Yeah.
That didn't, I don't know.
Still need to buy Mario Kart 8.
A couple of storage things.
Yeah, Tech Report, they're doing this really good series of stories where they're taking SSDs and they're basically writing data to them
For forever.
all day, every day.
Yes.
and they're-
Until they die.
until they
Yes.
die.
On
and then they're
purpose.
checking in on them
They're killing them.
occasionally.
So
They're not even doing firmware upgrades to make this die. They're just writing to them
yes.
to they die.
Yes. They're not trying to kill them like by doing the things you normally,
Hammers.
hammers and that kind of stuff. No, they're just like, imagine if you actually used, because there was this argument, or just a like conjecture or whatever have you. You always see these guys actually when we talk about like, we see them a lot of times in our SSD reviews.
Mm-hmm.
People will occasionally pipe in and they'll be like, oh, these things just fail all the time and they, the flash burns out too fast and all this other stuff. So
Sound like Jeremy.
Tech Report, we got to hand it to them. They're just like, well, let's just try to take a handful of the common capacity that people use. So they grabbed like one from each vendor, basically, 240 to 256 gig, just in that window of capacity, which is the most popular size that people tend to buy. And they just started just beating the crap out of them. Just with
So
writes.
they're combined in a system, and they're just having data.
There's
written
like
to them
3
over and
separate
over again.
systems,
Yeah.
I think, and there's like a pair of drives per system. I think that's how.
And
it
they're
is.
writing like the wind.
Yeah, they're just writing continuously. So he's been doing this for months and months now. And
So where are we at?
now
years.
they're now they
we're
are
a
at
year from when they started this.
So these are 250 gigabyte drives. They have now written
petabyte.
1,000 terabytes to them.
It seems
Okay.
reasonable.
So just over and over. Now realize these drives are not rated for this at all. Like
What are they? What like if you took a typical one, what would it be?
you're
rated
talking
at?
like 600 range if you're lucky.
600 terabytes.
Like that's probably
That's
where
the
it's
highest in.
If you go just based on like what it's supposed to do, like what it's
Oh, it's not even that. It's something like
yeah, it's
400.
it depends on
terabyte
it depends on which
lifetime
one,
write,
right?
Read, right.
Yeah, because they actually had like a triple L cell drive in there that you're just shocked would go that far, right? That was the Samsung.
So two of them
840.
died at about 700 terabytes. Is that? Am I reading this?
Yeah,
correctly?
they lost a couple of them, and then actually they lost another one died like right before the.
And then
right
the
before
Corsair
petabyte
Neutron
mark.
GTX didn't die, but its performance dropped considerably.
Yeah, it started doing weird stuff, and actually I think that's the SandForce drive as well. So it has a little bit of a benefit in that it's compressing data. So
Oh, right. Okay.
its
Yep.
flash probably has not seen a full
I thought the
petabyte.
Neutron GTX was that
What?
SA Data or whoever that other controller, because the
Silicon
SandForce
Image
were
one?
the two, Kingston?
Was it the Kingstons with the SandForce?
Yeah,
the
the
3Ks?
Kingston was SandForce.
Yeah, they're saying
they
here
did
that
it
the
both
Kingston
compressed and
HyperX
uncompressed.
3K was able to reach 1 petabyte written, though only 716 terabytes of actual
Okay,
writes.
yeah,
due
that's
to
the one with the
compression.
SandForce, isn't it?
Only
that's
716
SandForce,
terabytes.
Yeah, only 716 terabytes. Okay, so realize that this is thousands of times of like filling the entire drive up. So if you have this in your computer, like he's been doing this for, going on a year almost.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're
that's like Jeremy downloading RedTube day in and day out.
I go through this constantly.
Every day, all day.
So it's basically you're writing to the drive at full speed, which on these drives is, several hundred megabytes per second. Like, where are you going to get data? Like, if you're just a home user, you're just on your laptop.
Yeah.
Where are you going to get stuff?
That's what the internets are for, Al.
You can't get.
You can always find it.
I don't think you have an internet connection that will let you download 200 megabytes.
So if you have like a 50
I might
megabit,
hit the usage cap, yeah.
how about this? You have a 100 megabit crazy speed internet, right? If you're downloading at full speed, that's 12 megabytes per second. He's writing at like several hundred per second, continuously, 24/7.
So do you think then that this report shows that? Again, this is spot checking. It's one drive from each of these brands, but it's many brands.
Yeah.
SSD is more reliable than people think.
Well, first of all, if you're going off of the spec of how long they're supposed to last versus how long they are actually lasting in practice, they're lasting much longer, clearly, right?
But how could they not? How? Like, I don't understand how they even still get compared to hard drives. Like, it just doesn't. I don't understand why the assumption isn't that they would last.
A penny a gig or 50 cents a gig?
That's the difference. Yeah.
There's the cost thing. People assume that if they're going to spend so much more on something that they just wanted to, like, the assumption is it's just going to last forever. It's solid state. It should never burn out, right?
Right.
And flash memory actually does burn out because every time you go to do an erase, you're actually doing like this quantum tunneling thing where you're just blowing electrons into across a piece of silicon.
And it's electromigration.
Yeah.
It's all kinds of interesting molecular.
There's all kinds of like quantum mechanical stuff that goes on to just erase 2 kilobytes of data on an SSD. It's actually kind of cool, all the stuff that goes on. But you're doing that over and over again. You're basically moving current through something that's supposed to be an insulator. It's not happy about that, right? You can only do that so many times before you start burning things out. So these things can do that several thousand times in a row for all of these little tiny cells, and they can still retain data for, he actually does a longevity test.
So the truth is, like, the SSDs are dying slowly over time. It's a matter of how slowly and whether or not it actually affects the end user.
Yeah. And the reality
when do we trade out? Like, when do we get rid of does this tell us when we get rid of our SSDs? Like, when do I have to start, trading them out?
As just a person sitting at a computer actually making the stuff move around, like it's not in a server somewhere, it's pretty much going to probably last as long as you're alive. Really. If you're physically sitting, if you're sitting at the computer and you're the one moving that stuff around, it's probably going to outlast you.
If you're not purposely trying to do something like this.
Yeah. Unless you're running a batch thing that just continuously writes to it, it's probably going to outlast the person. Really.
And in a server environment?
Now,
we're going to see Google, stacking their shelves with this
that's
stuff?
a different story. Because in server environments, you do get drives that are, he was doing like sequential writes. In server environments, you get the type of writing that takes place combined with how flash memory gets written. There's a thing called write amplification. So the flash is being burned out at a faster rate compared to the amount of data you're actually.
Because of the randomness of the writes.
Yeah, because of the randomness and how they're actually smaller. You're writing smaller chunks of data than the erase block of a flash. Right. So you're actually blowing away more memory to clear space.
And not just enterprise. Clem in the chat room points out you'd have to be able to write constantly for 5 years to make SSDs usable for surveillance DVRs.
That's true.
Right. There's another use case where the life cycle of an SSD would matter.
Yeah, absolutely. But for surveillance DVRs, you would need an insane amount of streams simultaneously to constantly be rolling through this drive.
If you're recording 20 megabytes a second for years, that's fine.
Yeah, 20 megabytes a second, it would probably last the full 5 years easy on just a regular, typical consumer cost drive. Very cheap one, right?
So if you're worried about 5-year retention, just use it as a cache. It'll suck down however much you're going to stream to it, and then dump it off to tape or to spinning rust.
Yeah.
But what if you're the IRS and you're trying to save emails?
Yeah, they want
to really. Then you buy the one that blows up when you push the button.
You buy the one that blows up when you try to read.
You accidentally delete specific emails from specific people. That's how you. That's the brand of SSD I want, and I want it to.
And then blame quantum tunneling.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. I'd like to see that on a congressional committee.
Yeah, it's coming. You wait.
And all the congressmen would be like, quantum tunneling. Oh.
Now,
I'm already filing that one away.
speaking of server storage.
Yeah, speaking of server stuff, kind of had an editorial / bone picking, if you will, I guess. I don't know. I guess we'd call it.
But that's fine.
Kind of, sort of. I don't know. SanDisk wants to buy Fusion.io.
No,
Talk about a company that was ahead of its time, but then stayed there.
You're talking about Fusion.io. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people understand the enormity of the company that is SanDisk.
Yes, they're huge.
Like,
They make SD cards.
you see them as the SD card manufacturer. They make so much flash.
Yes.
Like, they are
They're a very large producer of
enormous
flash
company.
memory. It might
It's
not.
kind of like talking any kind of materials and saying BASF
Right.
is a small company.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Siemens, right?
yeah.
3M doesn't make much.
And it's
Yeah.
because SanDisk, a lot of the flash that they have made historically has been in all of the flash memory kind of cards, which people buy an awful lot more even today than they're buying solid state drives full of flash memory, right? So they're really big in that. Now SanDisk does make solid state drives. They've kind of moved into that over the past couple of years, just because who hasn't, especially since they make
that's
flash,
true.
right? But they wanted to buy Fusion.io. Now, Fusion.io is a company that's been around since 2008, 7.
Yeah, they're fairly recent. Yeah.
Yeah. So they came out
Well, I
and
mean, they're old for SSD stuff
they're well.
because they were
true.
charging a big chunk. Okay, as far as I know, from a lot of friends who have worked in heavy duty stuff, SSD were right around the corner from like 2000 and on. It's going to be right around the corner. And Fusion.io was one of the first guys to really have a product, back in the 2007, 2008.
Yes.
That made sense and was for, these server workloads that they are aimed at.
Yes, and it was now. In order to pull that off back then, SSD controllers were nowhere near where they are now, right? This
Not
is
to mention NAND.
not to mention NAND, right? I mean, NAND still kind of worked the same way. It hasn't really changed in how it
Yeah,
functions.
but the densities, I mean, they had
Right.
to stack those chips, and they were expensive.
Yeah. So what they basically came up with was just a very simple kind of a bridge chip that connects the host operating system to the flash memory, like as direct as you can get it. Basically, you're just talking straight to the flash through some driver, right? All the way to the point of things like wear leveling and dealing with write amplification and all those things that usually the controller in an SSD handles, and those kinds of things that have been tweaked and optimized and over the years for solid state drives for just regular ones. All of that stuff was handled in the driver for Fusion.io. So you kind of walked into it with the presumption that if you want this really fast storage, yes, you can have really fast flash memory storage, but the system connected to it really needs to be a beast because the CPU is acting like the controller by way of a driver. So the CPU of the host system is actually doing all that. It's almost like a Win modem. I hate to really draw
Win
that.
modem. Oh my God, I had a sudden flashback.
Yeah, I know. So Win modems had kind of a disadvantage because they were drawing CPU cycles off of the host system,
But you could run them in PCI
but you could
instead
run
of
it.
ISA.
Right. So, but it was a faster interface. So there was advantages, but there was a disadvantage. Right. Same exact thing applies to Fusion.io, except years ahead of time. Right. And it also used RAM resources of the host system as well. It kind of did some if you have a whole computer at your disposal, why not cache some of the writes and stuff like that? And now that looked
But if you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars on an SSD, you're probably going to spend tens of thousands of dollars on the surrounding hardware.
Yes, absolutely. Now, that kind of really puts them on a huge, big iron kind of. It's not like there's not a middle ground, right? You're like, if you wanted your web server for PCPer perspective to run on flash memory,
Okay.
you would probably not consider Fusion.io so much because you would have to build an entirely separate chassis
Well, sure.
just to handle.
It puts them at the extreme level of the enterprise market.
Yeah, you pretty much have to wrap a whole system around these things.
Facebook.
Yes, and that's
So
and
in
that's
other words,
their-
you have to build up the resources to handle the more flash you have, the more resources you'll need from your own system.
Yeah, you actually need more
I see.
system resources to handle the additional
For what
flash.
Fusion.io had built.
For the way Fusion.io basically built how their thing works.
Okay.
It's kind of like their infrastructure, right?
Okay.
Now the problem is that still applies today.
So basically, we have seen new things like this.
Yeah, we have seen new things. So I actually, when I saw the release that Fusion IO did, like about a week and a half ago now, they released this Atomic series, which is just a new version of pretty much
Same
what
stuff.
they've had before. And I saw the specs, and I was like, those specs are kind of look familiar to me. And it's basically the same specs as this little guy, which is Intel P3700 series, which we also reviewed not too long ago, which was launched around the same time as, like, within a day or two of Fusion IO's announcement, right? This guy uses a new standard. So the controller on this solid-state drive
Handles all the
of the stuff.
things that you would expect the controller to
It handle like if you want to write to the flash memory, all the host system does is just says put something at this address, and if it needs to put it on some other flash chip because of wear leveling or whatnot, it's all handled in the controller.
Sure.
It's all done, right? And not only that, but the interface this solid state drive uses is called NVMe, NVM Express, which is a like a controller or a interface standard designed to talk to flash memory with the lowest
right.
latency possible, right? So, and the driver for this barely uses any system resources. It is extremely efficient. Everything is really on between.
So the point is this is a better product for that enterprise level than what Fusion IO creates.
Right. You put this
So-
in a server.
So what?
You
Right, go
have
ahead.
you have
What's that going for, though? What is that going to say?
Way
That's-
less than Fusion IO.
way less than
actually.
Fusion IO products, actually.
really?
Like
Yeah.
like a quarter to an eighth when you consider the capacity versus what you're getting, right?
Huh.
And the specs are very, very similar. In fact, this is actually faster in probably about half of the specs.
Okay.
It's pretty much like a neck and neck sort of
So
thing, right?
what does that mean? How does that translate into what is happening with SanDisk?
It really kind of makes me scratch my head.
So SanDisk as a company has no footprint in this space.
I don't believe so.
We don't think so. Intel's not going to sell them their storage.
Division? No. Intel's
Right.
not going to let that go.
What other companies existed that were
There's-
in the super high-end flash market? You could maybe kind of go to OCZ,
Kind of OCZ.
kinda, but they just got bought by Toshiba
They
not
did.
too long ago.
So they're already snatched up by a flash memory
right.
maker.
So if you're SanDisk, you look at that and you see maybe the problems that Fusion IO has, but you say we're a many billion-dollar company.
Yep.
And we can fix that, right? But they're buying a team, they're buying expertise, they're buying WAS, and
They're buying patents probably.
That's true.
As well.
Yeah.
They're buying a software stack that has been pretty effective without having to design an actual ASIC to do all of that.
Right? What I would like to see them do with that technology, if they acquire it all, if this deal goes through and everything, is maybe take all those patents and all those algorithms and everything and make it hardware.
they could.
That would be a pretty darn good controller for an SSD.
Yeah.
Just in its own right, right? You put some kind of a CPU-ish thing and some RAM and you stick it on a board. It wouldn't necessarily be as efficient as this, but it would be a very fast, kind of a product, and it would...
I mean, you don't think that Fusion IO is not like a written off company at this point, right?
I wouldn't say they're
can
written
still
off, no.
change things. They can do things to improve in the areas where they are in a deficit. But if you look at this table in your story, right, 4K random write IOPS, the Fusion IO PX600 is drastically higher than what the Intel has.
It is,
Okay.
but it's kind of cheating with the driver thing.
It may be.
Yeah.
Well,
But it is a faster spec.
if it's a faster spec and you can do that for certain amounts of time,
Yeah.
Facebook likes that. Google likes that.
No, that's true.
Amazon likes that. So
Working on.
there
So
there
there's the
are
Nortel
benefits
storage
to it.
biz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And as long as we can, slap around shiny things that we can put in our hands, then it's all good.
Are you again with that thing, Josh?
Well, it kind of looked like yours. I mean,
need to
flip
put it on
yours
your-
around
you
and
need to
let's
put it on
compare
your
and
shoulder.
contrast.
all right, kids, that's enough.
It's a little
It
mini
looks like
boombox.
he's holding Wally's head.
Oh yeah.
Like he's torn off Wally's head, and I can't. That's
evil.
maybe just my.
Evil.
He's listening.
I want to.
Yes.
I want to.
I
get
wouldn't
to
put
our,
it past him.
I want to get to our last news story here today. We're running a little bit long today. It's almost tomorrow,
It's
so
almost
we got to
tomorrow.
move on.
Yeah, I just got the very polite call up from my wife saying,
Gotcha.
"Hello, darling."
Gotcha. So Watch Dogs, a game, came out last month, We'll say that. I don't know. Recently, and it was it's a good game. It got fairly good reviews.
Yep.
Interesting graphics. But if you remember when it was announced at E3 in 2012, it had this spectacular visual presentation.
Yeah.
And when we saw the game running in person, like when Ken and I went to Montreal for an event and we went to go tour the Ubisoft offices,
Was
it
not
did
the same.
not look good ananymore.
Yeah.
And
Like, what
that's-
happened?
That's
Like,
all everybody could talk about. And we
Yeah.
don't really know exactly what happened, but what's interesting is hackers, modders have found a way to re-enable the shader paths from the E3 demo in the current game. So you can take and drastically improve the image quality of the game by enabling these particular shader paths.
So these guys just tweaked a couple of numbers, basically.
Essentially.
Was a little bit more than an INI hack, but
Yeah.
And
Not much.
why did so this was like it was removed by the game maker?
So my guess is that there was performance penalties in some areas. Consoles maybe couldn't handle it in some cases. Though, Jeremy, you may know more than I. Like the indications from the news that I saw was that there wasn't a drastic hit on performance.
and strangely enough, a lot of people are reporting better performance. Which
so
in a way makes sense because all of a sudden shader paths that were sitting there going, can I do something? You know, you paid money for me. I'm just sort of sitting here.
Yeah.
Are now enabled. So there are some people that are saying, you know, it's actually a little bit smoother in and amongst the eye candy.
Right.
Although they've gone a little bit overboard on the bokeh. Some of the screenshots I've seen from the depth of field are a little bit crazy when it's a close-up scene. The far
You
ones
can't lose
look
with bokeh.
beautiful.
Though. Come on.
Yeah, man.
But there's a screenshot where he's standing on a street, and essentially the only two things you can see are a light post and a mailbox, and everything else is kind of blurred with depth of field.
It's artistic. You wouldn't understand, Jeremy.
Yeah.
If you don't understand it, it's art. I've learned over the years.
Okay, so here's the deal. You've got 2/3 of your potential customers running hardware that cannot show that off
Right.
nearly as well. And so those 2/3, the companies behind those products, are going to say, you know what? This isn't working for me. You need to turn this down, or else we're going to have a problem.
be a shame if
Conspiracy theories. I want to try this and install it and see. I'm curious if anybody in the chat room has tried it and what they see.
Did they have to find this stuff themselves? I mean, did they have to dig these things up themselves, or was it something that was released by the company?
Oh no.
Yeah, this is something that they
This is
found that the
just
company
We Love
didn't want them
Hackers
to
stuff.
find.
Are you sure that the company, or at least some programmer within
yeah,
the company,
that's
did
true.
not talk to their friend who is a modder?
Could it
Yeah,
have
it
been a
does
leak?
seem kind of weird that someone would just dig around looking for
You
that kind of
don't
stuff.
wanna
Oh, I guess
look in
you've
this
seen it looking
config
better. I
file.
suppose that
No,
makes
don't
sense.
look at that.
They're looking through stuff, and all of a sudden you see a tag that says E3 path or E3 2012, and you're like, well, that's kind of weird. What's that in there? What happens if I flag that on instead of that? And all of a sudden the water looks great.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell happened here? And then it can progress from there. It wouldn't surprise me if like a developer inside Ubisoft was like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, look in that direction. Right?
Yeah.
Because they.
So otherwise, could you imagine how cool that was if you were the guy who like got in there and then flicked the flag and went, "Oh my god!"
Yeah.
That's like my dream.
It's
Something
pretty-
like one day
it's
I'll
pretty cool
I'll
stuff.
trip across for one of those things.
Now I know you said you are in a time crunch. Do you want to stick around for our hardware software picks, or do you want to jet?
Got like 5 minutes? Is that I got like 5? Is that
Let's
is
do
right?
that. We can rush through these.
Yeah.
Because
Quick.
I mean my pick is definitely the most important.
Where is it?
My pick is the most important. I like that.
It was in
Clearly.
a box.
I found this in a box in that office that I need to go through. This is the Microsoft Intellimouse Explorer 3.0.
Thought it was a Stargate prop.
It is.
It looks very ancient.
No, it doesn't. Although I'm guessing, what year would you say this mouse came out in? Anybody have an idea?
I can't.
2005.
Yeah, I would
That
guess
recently?
about that.
I don't remember that
Yeah.
far back.
It's got a good spring. If you can hear it, the spring on the mouse buttons is still
Because
really
I've
good.
got the version before that are just
2.0?
the tan mice, and they're from 2000, 2002.
We were looking for one of those.
Yeah, I know I have one.
Oh,
Somewhere,
I've still got those.
I'm gonna hook this
They're
up.
not
to
tan
see
anymore. They're
tomorrow.
kinda yellowy, though.
Exclusive.
Exactly, and
It's funny if you look on Amazon, there is one of these is for sale for $68
Sweet.
used. So
retirement.
keep that in mind. All right, Jeremy, you're up next. What do you got for us?
Well, the only thing better than an Oculus Rift is an Oculus Rift you made yourself, especially when it's about half the price as the retail model.
Looks
Someone's
great.
put together step by step and posted it both the software he used and the hardware that he used, to build an Oculus Rift roll your own at about the same resolution as the one that the Mark I that came out. It's kind of really freaking neat. And for $150 and some work, I mean, not only do you have a nice project to do, and at the end of it go, I made this.
I
you
made
also
this.
get an Oculus Rift.
Hey, did he grind the lenses himself?
He found a source for them.
Oh, nice.
There was a place you could just buy
He
them.
found a
which
kid
was-
with
So he's still able to see, having used this device.
did not burn
It's
out
like
his
Steve
eyeballs.
Martin in The Jerk.
You're
He's
able
now,
to focus
permanently
within
cross-eyed.
2 or 3 inches of your face.
Yeah.
Well, someone
After
was
that.
telling me that it's amazing as long as you're moving in the right trajectory. As soon as you go off the trajectory, that's when the motion sickness apparently hits.
Yeah.
Well,
That's what
thankfully
I've
it's
heard.
strapped to your head, so it might be a little bit better. But Ryan's experienced the motion sickness.
Yeah, we have one of the first dev kits here, and it did not work well with me.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's like to me, it's like this hideous plague that I've got that basically I can't play half the games I love
Yeah.
because I literally there's a box. I have the PS3, I have the Xbox, and I have a box of gravel. And I pop a gravel and play the games like it's my kid equates
whole new
like
meaning on just 5
medication
more
with
minutes.
the games now.
All right, Josh,
Me.
you
I like expensive things that I can't afford.
okay?
And this is one of them.
It's a good
So,
looking one.
I had that widescreen, really widescreen. It was what, 27 something by 1080. Well, this is the bigger brother. It does 1440p. Well, plus that
3440 by
21 by 9.
1440.
It's only $1,000.
That's like super widescreen.
It's super widescreen.
21 by 9, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
$1,000.
temporarily-
That's like theatrical.
It's
You
out of
know.
stock. I think I know why, because I saw David Hewlett click on the link just about 10 seconds ago.
Yeah, with that $1,000 to burn.
Yeah.
We all got $1,000 to burn, which is why I'm doing a podcast at 10 o'clock at night.
That's it. Woohoo!
Alan, what do you got?
So my pick is going to be kind of a news post as well. I'm going to do a public service announcement, right? Ours did some story about how guys were hacking NAS boxes to mine Bitcoin and Dogecoin.
Perfect. Let's do it.
Yeah. No, you end up in jail and stuff. So back in January, February, some guy figured out a hack for Synology NAS boxes, and it just basically like a worm style hack, and it just went everywhere. And this guy made over $600 million in Dogecoin over 2 months.
See, we could have bought that monitor.
Now this was from people's Synology NAS boxes, which are not super powerful CPUs for mining. Somehow he made that much money. That means there was a lot of NASes
But it's been
infected,
fixed.
right?
That's a lot of NAS,
It
baby.
was
Yeah, it's
fixed.
nasty.
Now here's the thing: it was fixed very quickly by Synology, within a week.
Right.
So in February they issued a patch, and now there's been even a point release of their software since then. So they were on 4 point something, now they're on 5 point something, right?
But people aren't updating their
People aren't
machines.
updating. So
Yeah.
the thing is, the things are still infected, and they're still mining.
This guy's in jail making loads of money.
The guy's not. You're not making anything anymore, probably, but update your NAS machine with
he lives in
software,
Estonia.
right?
They don't
It's-
have,
So yeah, I mean, if you have a NAS that faces the internet potentially, you have to keep that thing up to date, because anything that can infect your computer that Windows issues patches for, Microsoft issues patches for, and Linux issues patches for, and OS 10,
Yeah.
everything,
All right.
it applies to your NAS as well. It's its own computer. You have to update it and keep it secure.
David, do you have anything you want to bring up here at the end? You don't have to have a hardware.
as I say, my thing that I just got sucked into was the Mantle and the Gameworks stuff. I was just, I would advise everyone to go and look at those demos because they're just they're rather spectacular. And there's some great stuff that I saw about them testing out the new Mantle stuff and just what they could, the number of these. I can't remember who had it, but it had basically one of these sort of space simulation games.
Oh,
with
yeah.
just like
Starswarm?
7,000 different ships going at the same time and stuff. So for those nerds that like that programming interface thing, that would be mine. That would be my.
That was a cool demo. It was like real time CGI, basically, just
gorgeous.
There's
Yeah.
cool stuff. Lots
Yeah.
of things happening.
Yep.
So,
Well, and the GameWorks stuff. I mean, the GameWorks stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, look at that. The FaceWorks stuff. It. You really have to, give it a couple of looks before you go. Oh no, I guess that's CG.
I think in that demo the guy was bald though, right?
He was bald.
Probably.
That's fine. I think maybe that's what
I
just
remember
attracted me
seeing
to
just
it.
a picture just a little bit ago of a 1995 gaming color cover of next generation graphics, and you look at this stuff and it's like the Wii first generation stuff. I mean, we're so far beyond that, it's not even funny.
Yep.
That uncanny valley keeps getting a little bit farther away.
Yeah,
That's true.
but it's still there, isn't it? It's still just a little something.
Yeah.
Well,
They're
David,
still soap opera actors.
David, we really appreciate you joining us. For people who, again, we give a reminder at the beginning, we'll give a reminder at the end. Where's the best place for people to find you and follow you and figure out what you're doing these days?
Definitely Twitter I'm very good on Twitter, and then if you go to this fanaticland.com, you'll get taken to YouTube, and you can join me on my little D-Geek diaries.
Well, good luck with that, and you're welcome back here anytime. And I hope we didn't bore you with our motherboard discussion.
No, this is great. I love it because it's my excuse to do this homework. So I get to sit down and say, everyone, leave me alone. I gotta geek out.
Study up
so
for this very important meeting I'm having over Skype. With
exactly.
these guys.
I've got to be prepared for this.
Doesn't your sister live in Toronto too?
She's in Toronto as well. Well, although she's been driving around a lot recently. She just got her driver's license, which is dangerous for everybody.
What?
That should be our warning for the week. Basically, Jane. It's my wife. Kate is now driving. So yeah.
The QEW will never be the same.
Well, I go up to Markham in Toronto every once in a while, so I'll let you know next time we're out that direction.
She's careening around the highway. Very good.
Yeah. But again, thank you very much for joining us. And everybody else watching, if you want to find us, PCPer.com/podcast, PCPer.com/live, and just PCPer.com would be good as well to check out all the stories and news posts that we talked about and wrote about and will continue to write about going forward. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next week. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Alan Malentano.
And
that's
am
not
David
Alvin Malentano.
Yes.
We don't care about Alan.
No, we don't care about
we
that.
blocked him out anyway. It's
That
fine.
guy's old.